There we go.
Yes, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on what is actually our final episode of Marching Forward with Flow Y Kanban. And for those of you who are late to join us, you're missing out on a great episode, but we're recording, so you can always just listen to the rebroadcast later on, because our special guest today is Colleen Johnson, the CEO of ProKanban.org, and she is coming to talk to us about everything Kanban. So if you have any questions, if you have any concerns about Kanban, why should you take Kanban training, then this is the episode to listen to. So without further ado, let me introduce myself. I'm Andrea Pratt-Smith, the professional Kanban trainer, the first in the Caribbean and the only professional Kanban trainer in the Bahamas. And my co-host is Omar Gonzalez. And today is a special day, Omar. Today is actually the 50th day of independence, our 50th anniversary in the Bahamas. So we've been celebrating for the whole year. And last night, my daughter and I went out on Clifford Park and we watched the police tattoo, and they had this huge celebration with all these choirs singing and junkanoo and dancing. And it started at 5 p.m. and it overpassed midnight when the fireworks went off. So we've been celebrating consistently for the whole year, and we're so proud to be Bahamian and join the party every single weekend. There's something going on. So Omar, let's kick it off with Colleen introducing herself firstly.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. And thanks again for the invite to join the series and to close it out. Like Andrea said, my name is Colleen Johnson. I'm the CEO of ProKanban.org and the founder of Scatterspoke, a tool for more effective retrospectives. I have been in the IT space for a little over 20 years. I started out in QA and got kind of learned all about bad process as a QA engineer on waterfall projects. So got to see the impacts, right, of making changes late, being over budget, over time, behind schedule, and trying to pick up the slack often in those projects. And then I became a Scrum Master and learned a lot about very early Scrum practices in a small startup, and then learned about Kanban. And so as I started to learn more about Kanban, I really fell in love with the data side of things and the metrics and being able to forecast more predictable delivery with less headaches. So that brings me to my journey with ProKanban. We launched ProKanban in 2020. It's a pandemic baby. So we're just starting to experience a lot of what the community has to offer and how the community can come together in person. So this year's been a fun journey of starting to get to meet a lot of people who I've only ever met online. Andrea included. We got to meet in Atlanta.
In January.
Yeah. So it's been a fun year in starting to see what the community can do in person.
Speaking about that in-person meetup, I wanted to ask you, did you think it was weird when I pulled out my Bahamian flag and had everybody taking pictures with the flag? Like, was that weird for you?
No, it was fun. I loved it.
Yeah, because I travel with my flag and I'm like, okay, who else does this? Like, do you guys travel with the American flag or is it just me?
I do not travel with an American flag or a Colorado flag. But
all right,
it was great, Andrea.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask that question because when I tell fellow Bahamians that whenever I go somewhere, I'd like to travel with my Bahamian flag because I'm a very proud Bahamian. And for me, in January, that marked a very significant occasion for me because I was becoming the first Bahamian professional Kanban trainer and also the first professional Kanban trainer in the entire Caribbean. So I felt like that was flag worthy. That was like podium worthy. I wanted to hear the Bahamian national anthem.
Yeah, that's what's you need a speaker now, a portable speaker with your flag. So you can bring them together.
I think so. Like, I just need to have the whole kit together for whenever I do something that's so historic. I just like break out the kit, So that's just a question I wanted to ask. I never asked anyone, but I'm glad you didn't think it was weird.
No, I loved it.
Okay, Omar, over to you with any questions you may have.
Thanks. Welcome again, Colleen. Now, you mentioned that you worked in QA, you worked with Scrum, and then Kanban hit you, what was that? Because you liked about the data, the metrics, and seeing how, what specifically was that moment in which you had that epiphany and say, Kanban is the way?
Yeah. I had an engineering manager pull me aside at one point in my career as a Scrum Master and tell me, stop calling people out at stand up when their work is stuck. You're making them feel bad. And my initial reaction to it was, then why do you have me here? What am I supposed to be doing if I'm not trying to help move the work along? But I think, there's probably a whole Kanban sticker pack here of sayings, but one of the ones I really love is manage the work, not the people. And I think when I started learning more about Kanban and about flow metrics, I felt like it really gave me the tools to have that conversation about the work in a way that didn't feel like I was calling anyone out. So instead of saying, hey, Omar, you said 3 days ago, this story that you've been working on would be done and that you'd be moving on to the next thing in the backlog, I can say, it looks like for this particular item that it has aged past a certain number of days and is approaching our SLE or our service level expectation. As a team, what are we going to do to make sure that we move this ticket along, or that we move this to the next stage of the workflow? And so it becomes about how are we going to organize around the work? And I'm using data to drive that conversation instead of calling you out or putting you in a spot where you feel defensive because I'm asking why your work isn't moving. And so I think that was probably the first big thing that got my attention and got me excited. I would say the second thing was around forecasting. So everybody's got different feelings, usually strong feelings about story pointing. I have never been a big fan of it. I think the conversation that story pointing produces and facilitates is super productive and really important for the teams. But I guess I've seen so many implementations of story pointing kind of go wrong, where the teams view it as how they get credit. I'm giving that some air quotes. They get credit for their work, or they want part of their points in one sprint and the other point, set of points in the next sprint. And even though we tell organizations not to compare teams' points, I think every company does to some, charting out average velocity over time or things like that. And I think it ends up producing a lot of bad behavior as a side effect. And so when I first started learning about probabilistic forecasting, I got pretty excited that there was not only a different way to get to forecasts, but a way that was really lightweight and you could bring to the team to have that conversation. And so, one of the things we talk a lot about when we start talking about probabilistic forecasting is how do I make the transition, right? That's usually the first question we hear. We do everything by story points and we forecast our work based off of average velocity. How do I move to this model of using probabilistic forecasting? And I think it's baby steps and kind of comparing the two. And so when I first started using probabilistic forecasting with teams that were really more used to that approach of using story points and velocity, I didn't change anything for them. I still had them go through that process of pointing all their work and looking at how many points now we're in this feature and what's our velocity look like. But then I would also run all the probabilistic forecasting on that same set of data and then bring that to the team to say, based on story points and velocity, here's what this is saying. And based on probabilistic forecasting of your past throughput data, here's what this is saying. And really just a way to kind of give them another data point and another piece of the conversation to have. So those two things is a very long-winded answer, but those two things around the data side of Kanban are really what got me so excited.
Interesting. So you ease them into the process. You start working with what they have, and then you ease them little by little until you probably get them off of that and then into it. So I would assume that, or would it be correct to assume that every client or customer that you attend, you really get to know their process first and then drive them towards Kanban? Or do you still stay working the Scrum approach and integrating some pieces of Kanban into the mix?
I would say it really depends. So, for a lot of teams, it's, sometimes we get brought in as a coach and it's not like, hey, I want to learn Kanban, right? It's just help make us more predictable and more efficient in the value we're delivering. And in those cases, I usually try to understand where they're at, what things are working, what's not working, what would their customers say their problems are or their pain points are with how that team is delivering. And those start to give you opportunities to bring maybe Kanban practices in one by one, right? Looking at service level expectations and work item age is usually a great place to start, regardless of what the team is doing. But I would say I've also worked with a decent amount of organizations' security departments. And in those cases, Scrum's not going to work. It just isn't, right? They can't decide what they're going to work on for the next 2 weeks and plan work out in that way. It's a lot of firefighting. It has to be highly responsive. And they have to have a system in place to respond to work as it's coming in a way that's quick and that they're confident that they're picking the right thing to work on next. And so in those cases, it was less about understanding the current system and trying to modify that, and more about what needs to be true for us to work in that way going forward. And so, I think it depends. It depends on the team that you're walking into and the situation you're walking into, what they need. But sometimes it's like you said, sometimes we go and it's pulling some small bits of Kanban in with what they're doing now. And then other times it's really ground up, like, okay, we need process and we need things in place right away that are going to work for us and give us confidence in what we're delivering. And sometimes that means we're rolling Kanban out from the beginning.
Okay. Now, following that, what from reading the Agile adoption guides, for some reason, Scrum is still way above Kanban. Depending on the guide that you read or the adoption guide you read, the difference could be huge. We're talking about maybe Kanban is a 10 to maybe a 20% of adoption versus Scrum, which could be an 80 or 90. So what, to your view, is something that is just not getting Kanban the attention it deserves? What is that? Because even myself, I could say from experience, I recently implemented something with my engineering infrastructure teams, but still, when I look at other people, all you hear is Scrum, 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 and really little Kanban, if anything at all.
Yeah, it's definitely true. And I think for a lot of folks, there's just a lot of misunderstanding about what Kanban is, right? We could maybe blame Jira a little bit for this, but I mean, for a lot of teams, it's like, oh, well, we have a Kanban board. We're doing Kanban, right? Our board looks different than maybe what a Scrum team's board looks like, or maybe, instead of subtasks, we have a column for each of those different stages. And so teams are like, oh, we're already doing this. And I think it's just a lack of understanding of what good Kanban looks like and how to get all of the things that Kanban could promise you from those practices. So I think that it's a lot of just misunderstanding. I think things like the Kanban guide are helping with that, to try to create a shared base level of knowledge so that we're all speaking the same language. But, I think those things tend to breed other assumptions that hurt Kanban and hurt people's understanding of what Kanban is. One that I hear a lot is that there's no discipline or there's no structure to Kanban. And in a lot of ways, I think there's almost more structure to Kanban than there is to other practices. I've heard a lot of leaders push back on Kanban because in their mind, it's like, oh, well, things can take as long as they take, right? If there's no sprint and there's no time box, then something could take 4 weeks because it's just sitting there on the board. Where in reality, there's really some pretty stringent ways to manage work in a Kanban system to make sure that it's not aging unnecessarily once it's in progress. But I don't think a lot of folks start there. I think we tend to think of it as just the board, and then all those things get tacked on, right? Work takes as long as it takes, and things can age forever, and there's no structure because there's no deadlines. And so I think we have a long ways to go in chipping away at some of those myths, and until we start to get more good implementation of Kanban out in the market, I think that will always be the biggest hurdle we have.
Yeah. Well, Colleen, I'm going to give you a quick break from questions from the audience. If there's anybody who has a question, please come off mute and go for it. We're talking about Colleen Johnson here. So if you really want to get a great answer, she's the one to go to right now. So if anybody has a question, please feel free to come off mute. Nothing. Let me see if I see anything in the chat. Nothing there.
That's our 5-second pause for
Yeah.
questions. We didn't get any takers on that one. So I'll ask the question. Colleen, can you tell us a little bit about what the ProKanban.org community is doing as far as the empowerment of women and your scholarship program?
Yeah, I'd love to. So we have a Women in Kanban scholarship program through ProKanban to help women become ProKanban trainers. This year was actually our largest cohort and the most applications we've ever received for the group. And so in these cohorts, the group goes through and takes Applying Professional Kanban together. So our intro class, they do that with the group. And then we do a series of small cohort meetups after the class takes place, where we work on student questions. We talk about revisiting parts of the content that maybe weren't clear. So we really try to spend a lot of time prepping the women in the program to become trainers. And then we also spend some time talking about marketing, building your own professional brand, and looking at things like how do you start your own business? You know, if you're working as an internal coach for an organization, but you're interested in maybe eventually becoming an independent consultant, how can you leverage your ability to teach ProKanban classes to help you get to that point? So we talk through a lot of the business side of things as well. But I think probably one of the coolest parts of these cohorts is that they tend to stay in touch long after they've all graduated and become trainers. We've seen a lot of scholarship recipients continue to co-teach together for a long time, and just really support each other in the space. You know, I think tech in general tends to be a very male-dominated industry. And so by carving out space for this program, it's given us an opportunity to have women supporting other women. And really making sure that we're creating a community where we're making that a priority.
Well, speaking of women supporting other women, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for allowing me to be a part of the scholarship program. I don't know if it's public knowledge. I think it should be by now, but that's how I got my start with ProKanban.org. Being a recipient of a scholarship, and I call them my sisters in Kanban, because a lot of us, we are also part of Women in Agile. So we just transition and being part of Women in Kanban now. So thank you for that opportunity and allowing me to be the first professional Kanban trainer in the Bahamas. So you kind of open up that door for me and shattered that glass ceiling, and I'm just enjoying this experience and working alongside all of the other trainers in this community and seeing how not only can I experience growth, but how I can help others.
Yeah. And well, and Andrea, you've done an incredible job of paying it forward too. You know, you've stayed so active in the community and working with the current cohort. And I think that's an incredible thing to see, that everybody sticks around and tries to help mentor the future group. So thank you for your contribution to this too.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to serve. And we are almost at our time box. We have about 11 more minutes left. So we're going to open up again. Does anyone have a question? I think somebody wrote a question in the chat, Omar.
Yes, AJ wrote, what do you advise for a team who doesn't want to have meetings aside from backlog refinement meetings? Those stakeholders seem to be happy with the team.
Yeah, so, you know, it's funny, I mentioned the company that I worked for where I had been a Scrum Master and was rolling Scrum out for all the teams I worked with. And that was the organization that said, oh, we heard about something called Kanban. We'd like to send you off to Kanban training and have you come back and switch all our teams from Scrum to Kanban. And the main driver was that the team said that Scrum had too many meetings. Now, I don't think that's a good catalyst for completely swapping processes out. But I think this is something that we hear a lot, right? That the teams are burned out with meetings. One thing that, you know, you can start to see as you look at Kanban practices is some of the things like doing planning every 2 weeks kind of goes away. Even backlog refinement changes slightly to be more on demand instead of at a calendared cadence. And so you may be doing backlog refinement even as part of a daily sync up, where after the daily you say, we need to figure out what the next highest priority items are to pull in. So we're going to do refinement right after our stand up. So some teams change that backlog refinement to be more on demand instead of every 2 weeks. But I would say one thing that a lot of teams forget is that a big part of Kanban is improvement and using the data that your team has to help you improve your process. And so while you may be able to do less frequent refinement meetings and maybe drop planning meetings altogether, it is still really important, regardless of which practices you're using, to keep that retrospective. Some Kanban teams stick with every 2 weeks, and I see that a lot in organizations where there's a mix of some Kanban, some Scrum. But I think as teams progress and work more together and start to see more system stability, they tend to move to monthly. But I usually try to use that system stability as the thing that we're looking for before we move to more infrequent retrospectives, right? So if things are still changing and you're trying to build that stability into your system where you've got a pretty consistent throughput and a consistent work in progress amount, and you're seeing less variability in your cycle time data, those can be things that tell you, okay, maybe we don't need to make a lot of changes to our process anymore. So we'll just check in once a month. But retrospectives, I would say, are the thing that you want to not lose track of there. I hope that helps, AJ.
AJ is giving you a round of applause for that response. So I guess you are on point. Do we have any more audience questions? Feel free to come off mute and ask a question.
Hi, Colleen. It's Phil.
Hi, Phil.
Yeah, you're all right. Sorry, I joined late, a little bit late. So I just want to know, are there any recommended trainings and certifications for Kanban, the same way we have for Scrum, like a professional Scrum Master and the rest? Then are there certified organizations that are offering such trainings? So what are the importance of the trainings and what are the importance of the trainings and the certifications?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's great debate in the Agile space about the value of certifications. And I think it's really kind of a personal question in a lot of ways. So I think the certifications, the way we're set up for Pro Kanban, are always optional. You can take a Pro Kanban course and not take the assessment if you don't want the certification or don't care particularly about the certification. So that's up to you. You can also get certified without taking a class. And so you can choose to self-study using the resources on the site and go take that assessment exam and never have taken a in-person course. The main distinction between our courses and our certifications through Pro Kanban are that the courses are really designed to be practical things that you can put into practice with your team right away. We want you to leave that class and go, I'm going to work tomorrow. I've got something new to try with this team. So they're not really intended to be exam prep courses. The certification assessments that you can take online, and there is an open assessment for each paid assessment, so you can take a free version of it and practice, is really to make sure that we have established a shared set of language and a shared set of ways of talking about all these different practices. And that has really been missing from the Kanban community for quite some time. So I mentioned the Kanban guide. If you go on prokanban.org, you'll find links to the Kanban guide. And I think it's translated in over 20 languages now. And the guide is what all of our exams and all of our courses are built upon. So we're really trying to use what's in the Kanban guide as a base level, a foundation for us all to build those practices off of. But whether or not you want the class versus the assessment is really something you'll have to decide for yourself. The assessments and the certifications can be great for your resume. We issue all of the Pro Kanban certifications through Credly, and Credly actually just launched a way where recruiters or hiring managers can go search for certain credentials and see everyone that has that. And so if an organization is looking for folks that they know are trained in professional Kanban, they can go search for those people in Credly. So from that perspective, it can help you for job search. But whether or not you want to do the course or the assessment path is really up to you.
Well, Phil, I hope that Colleen answered your question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Definitely.
And I'm going to put in a shameless plug since I'm a professional Kanban trainer. Why would you not want to take a class with me? Why just go for the assessment when you can sit in the class and enjoy me teaching you and us having this collaboration and talking and learning from each other? So Phil, that's an option as well. And speaking of classes, I am offering the Applying Professional Kanban training this month, July 17th, 18th, and 19th, and again on the 22nd and 29th of July. And since today is the 50th independence of the Bahamas, and I am such a proud Bahamian that travels with my Bahamas flag, you can actually go on the ticket tailor links today only. And for the general admission tickets, we're offering a 50% off discount code. So for Bahamas 50th independence anniversary, you get to take the Applying Professional Kanban class with the Bahamas's only professional Kanban trainer for 50% off. That discount code, Omar is typing it in the chat. It's Bahamas 50. That's so easy to remember because today is our 50th year of independence. So if you go on my LinkedIn page today only, you'll see all of the links for the Applying Professional Kanban class. Just put in that discount code and get 50% off that training. So we have a few more minutes. Omar or Colleen, do you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, that's a great opportunity to take an amazing class with an amazing trainer. So I hope you have an opportunity to join Andrea for that class. And if you aren't already a member of our Slack community, the Slack community is open to anyone who's interested in joining. And it is a great place to ask questions, right? So our goal with our Kanban community is that it is for people in all stages of their learning journey, whether you've been part of practicing or implementing Kanban for the last 10 years, or if you're brand new and this is the first time you've heard about it, we want to make a space where everybody can learn together. So check out Slack, and you can find that link on the prokanban.org website as well.
Thank you so much, Colleen, for joining us on our final episode. It feels so wrong to go away, but this was an experiment that we only wanted to try for a few episodes leading up to the Kanban classes. But we'll be back, not in this format, but I'm sure Omar and I will put our heads together and think about something new and exciting. And we're always experimenting. And I think that's what it is to be an Agilist. You try something, see how it feels. If it doesn't work, then you pivot, you shift, you be agile about it. But you always practice empiricism. You learn by doing. And that's what we're trying to do. Learn by doing, using these platforms to reach persons who may be interested in Kanban training, to reach persons who want to know more about project management, or to reach those persons who just like to learn, like myself, who are, avid learners, continuous learners, and they just want to know what's out there. What am I missing? How can I be connected? So like Colleen said, join the Pro Kanban community on Slack. There is, I don't know, almost 100 trainers that are on that channel right now, and everyone is always answering questions. So if you have any questions about Kanban, if you have any questions about Agile, if you have any questions about life, reach out. Someone will answer you. So Omar, thank you for being my co-host today. Omar, you want to wrap us up?
Yes, ma'am. Well, we thank you all for your time. Thank you, Colleen, for coming on. As always, your answers invite to more, not only insight, but to learn from somebody who's actually done this a lot in the field. So thank you for that a lot. And again, if anybody wants to know more, any questions, any doubts, please feel free to join the Slack channel or contact me, Colleen, or Andrea, and we will gladly help you out in any way we can. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll hope to see you in our next project.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.